a tough situation. You understand why these games are probably not going to be played, but it does have ramifications sometimes for teams and what they hope to perceive in the offseason or the postseason.
Yeah,
Rather.
absolutely. And safety first. This time of the year, you get to the latter part of August, early September. It seems like every year they're big storms, and we obviously have to think about that first and foremost and everybody's safety. And as much as fans and all of us get excited for games, you always want to take every precaution and be careful. And in some cases, some of these games, they're able to be made up at the end of the year. They have a mutual bye week or whatever it might be. And in other cases, you lose the game. So I think everybody in every fan base understands, what's happening and the seriousness of that. And you kind of make the adjustments that you have to make, and you kind of move on to the next week. But we'll see. I think right now you've got, 3 games that I'm aware of, maybe more than that at this point. But I know of the UCF and Carolina game and Virginia Tech and ECU and West Virginia and NC State. And I think there's another game might have been moved over to Nashville, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm all for it. And we've seen the devastation that some of these storms have had, obviously in the past. And it's a good reminder of what's important.
Absolutely. Talking to Kirk Herbstreit in the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line, and we certainly wish everyone well as they prepare for that. As we look to the rest of the college football weekend, though, Herbie, we know this weekend Ohio State TCU is one of the banner matchups of the weekend, and the last week of Urban Meyer's suspension before that team gets their head coach back. So the first real test for the season, what are you expecting Ohio State and TCU to look like?
What's up, bud? I think this is where we find out a little bit more about Ohio State. They've had 2 teams that are, with inferior opponents in Oregon State and Rutgers, and their offense has really been humming. And now we really find out about Dwayne Haskins on the road. They're going to face some adversity. How do you respond to that adversity? He did a great job in Ann Arbor last year when he came in for JT Barrett, but now it's he's the sheriff. It's his team. And Billy Price isn't there, and JT Barrett isn't there. So this is an opportunity for the 2018 team to kind of show who they are away from home, and not just without Urban Meyer, but just the players on the field. And, Gary Patterson is one of the best defensive coaches in the game. He'll come up with a lot of creative ways to create pressure, try to get after Haskins, try to create some turnovers. And he's going to have to. I mean, if you look at the line of scrimmage, Ohio State has a noticeable advantage in size. Gary will be the first one to probably tell you that. And so they've got to come up with ways to be creative and use their speed to their advantage and use their scheme to their advantage. And like I said, we'll walk out of here. We'll be able to talk next week and say, wow, how about TCU and that defense? Or we'll say, wow, Ohio State, daggone. I mean, that was impressive. So one way or another, we're going to have an idea of where these 2 teams are as we get ready. And Ohio State wins this game, being away from home. Remember, end of the month, they have a big showdown on the road again against Penn State in the whiteout as a primetime game. So this will be a big test for them, and to see if they pass it, that could help them get ready for even a bigger challenge down the road.
Kirk Herbstreit with us, not only our college football analyst, but part of the Herbstreit and Fitzsimmons podcast. One of the big surprises, or pleasant surprises this year, has been what LSU and Ed Orgeron has been able to do. They had that big win over Miami week 1. They're 2-0 on the season. Last year, they upset Auburn in Death Valley. This year, they go to Auburn. Is this a preview of what we might see down the road going up against Alabama in the SEC West?
Man, I've really loved what I've seen from LSU defensively. I think the offense is still a work in progress with Joe Burrows, who transferred over from Ohio State, with his graduate transfers who can play right away. While I think Joe has tremendous upside, I still think they're kind of figuring things out on that side of the football. Their defense is kind of what you would expect from Dave Aranda's defense. I mean, they are flying around and making it tough for opposing offenses. They've gained a lot of confidence with that that week 1 win over Miami. This is a different animal. I mean, you go to Jordan-Hare and in a rivalry game and take on a pretty talented Auburn team who has just as good of a defense, if not better, and when they're playing at home. And you got a veteran quarterback now in Jarrett Stidham. So on paper, this is a game that would favor Auburn because they're at home and because of the quarterback. But this has the feeling of one of those typical, 20-17, 20-16, low scoring, who's going to get a block punt, who's going to get a turnover deep in the opponent's territory kind of games. And because of that, I've got to go with Auburn just because I think that they're playing at home. And keep in mind with Auburn, as we get further down the road, that win against Washington, there's a possibility if they were to win a game like this and go through, and it's got a long stretch of games, by the way, in the SEC West with the way A&M's playing. But if they were able to get through there and get to the Iron Bowl and lose that game in a close fashion, and then they would avoid going to have to play in the SEC championship game. Auburn would be that team, much like Alabama a year ago, who could avoid a trip to Atlanta and still make it in as one of the top 4 teams because of that win against Washington. So I'm not trying to get ahead of myself. I'm just saying there's a lot at stake for Auburn, and they can't afford any other losses potentially until they get to, of course, Alabama, where you throw out the records in that rivalry game. But Alabama clearly the team to beat in the whole country at this point.
Yep, a lot at stake early on in this college football season for sure. Kirk Herbstreit with us on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line here at Golic and Wingo. All right, Herbie, we've got a couple of the matchups we talked about. Only 3 ranked versus ranked matchups this weekend. So in your mind, is there any team on upset alert already for you?
Man, I thought it leads me perfectly into your alma mater. I think they better be careful with Vandy. I know that sounds crazy to say that sentence, but Vandy has a veteran team. Vandy is going to be a team that Brian Kelly, no matter what he says to his team, they'll probably have a tough time getting sky high emotionally for. Vandy is not going to be intimidated by playing in South Bend. They play in the SEC, and they play in big stadiums all the time. I'm not saying that, hey, look out, Vandy's going to blow Notre Dame out. I'm just saying the Vandy defense alone will be very, very competitive against Brandon Wimbush and Notre Dame. They've got NFL players on that defense, especially in the secondary. And that's a game that Notre Dame has to be careful with and not look by and look to some of the bigger names on their schedule. So we'll see the mental toughness and the maturity of Notre Dame this week